Alright, so while we're all waiting for GTA 6 to come out and the developers keep on teasing us with new screenshots and trailers, I was scrolling through the latest Rockstar shots and I stopped on this one, Jason's house. And I got kind of obsessed with it, you know? These details in the textures and materials are insane. The cracks, the peeling paint and slightly rotten boards. It looks incredible, and I thought why not to recreate this in Blender? So I want to walk through how I built this scene. My goal wasn't just to make this house in Blender, it was literally recreate every single detail, the paint, the cracks, with as much attention as possible. So let's get into it, and I'll show you how I did this in Blender. So the first step is fSpy. I open the program and open the GTA 6 screenshot. It's a free tool that reconstructs the camera for you based on the axis you set. It calculates the focal length and camera angle, and this works the same way for any photo. If you ever need to put the camera data from a photo to match it in Blender, this is how you can do it. So once it's done, I save the data to the file and jump back to the Blender. To actually use the data from fSpy, we need an add-on. This also free add-on from the developers page. Just make sure it's enabled. Then go to import and select our saved file. Boom! You've got exact copy of the camera from the image right here in Blender. Now, fSpy doesn't know where the ground is, so to fix this, I just add a standard plane in Blender, select the camera and rise it up until the plane lines up as a ground level in the scene. Easy to do, just elbow against axis in the Blender viewport. The next step is checking and fixing the scale, which matters a lot, so I do this with a human reference model. I drop it into the scene and compare it against what's visible through the camera, and right away I can see the image is a bit bigger than the actual size of the scene. So I select the plane and the camera, leave the human model as my reference size, and scale the camera relative to the scene. That fixes the scale pretty easily, and now it actually looks right, at least visually. This already feels a lot closer to the truth. I keep the human model in the scene as my reference size. I'll still need it for modeling just to get a better overall sense of scale and always have something to check against. I start modeling with that plane that I already created, that's the ground. And check this out, I'm scaling this plane right inside camera view, and I can already see exactly where it needs to line up on the reference, where the ground ends in the shot, and that's exactly where I stretch it to. Almost this entire scene gets built through camera view, matching everything precisely to the game screenshot. And even though I'm walking directly through the camera the whole time, everything stays accurately, because the focal length is already correct thanks to fSpy. In the camera settings, fSpy set our image as a background for the camera, so I can see this reference right here in the Blender viewport. I change depth to front, so the image always sits over the scene. There is also opacity, which I use constantly through the whole process, because having the image cover the entire scene gets in the way when you're trying to see details, so I just lower the opacity, some low value where we can still see the reference clearly, but the scene underneath stay readable too. From here, modeling is straightforward. I add a cube, match it against the reference, and place everything step by step. The main house is the same story. Cube, stretch it to match the reference, extrude the roof, and there is the house, right in the scene. I'm modeling almost everything through the camera, but at the same time I'll check how it actually looks in 3D space too. Even though building this way through the camera guarantee accuracy, It's still worth checking the 3D viewport, especially if you don't have a strong feel of reading 3D space yet. I really tried to recreate every single detail as closely as I could to reference. And now we get the reason I even start this project, the textures. Just look at this original GTA 6 screenshot. This texture is basically a piece of art. All these tiny details, the wear, the paint, the wood, down, it just looks incredible. To build a material like this one in Blender, I use texture paint right inside Blender itself. And to make the whole process easier, I use Ucupaint add-on. It adds a full layered system to Blender, so I can literally build every layer for complex material and blend them just by painting masks. The base layer for this material is wood texture. Then comes the paint layer, but instead of just dropping in solid color, I used a dirt texture instead. It's black-white texture originally, so to give it a color, I use the color ramp modifier in Ucupaint. Inside the color ramp, I can easily deal in whatever paint color I want while still keeping the texture's natural detail. And just by adjusting the sliders in the color ramp, I get even more control over the texture itself. I also swap the black color in the color ramp to the same base color, just a bit darker. That gives me this not uniform color structure. So the paint layer over the wood isn't just a flat single color fill, it actually has its own internal variation, darker in some spots, lighter in others. Next, I add a dirt texture mask on the same paint layer. And this is really where the complex material starts coming together. The mask lets me show spots where the paint has worn away completely, revealing the wood underneath. Then there is another mask on the same layer. This one I paint by hand, making the exact spots where I know there shouldn't be any paint at all, down near the bottom beam, just like in the screenshot, in the reference. That area definitely shouldn't have paint, so I remove it with a black brush. I'm using my custom brushes for this, they make the effect way more realistic. The default brushes just don't cut it here. After that, I add two more layers, black and white. These two separate layers, one to locally darken certain boards, the other to lighten others. I paint this by hand too, just to keep full control and stay as close to the reference as possible. Then comes the weathering layer. And this is where all the atmospheric wear on the wall lives. There is a lot going on here, and again, I'm using my custom brushes for it. For maximum realism, I do this board by board, individually, because that's actually how it appears in the real life. Some effect can spread across multiple boards at once, sure, but most of the time it really is painting each facade board on its own. Once I've got this whole set of layers built out for different jobs, I can work more precisely with each one. At this point, I can already see the full picture, so it's clear where I need to strip black paint and expose more wood, where I need to bring some paint back or add dirt or some other effect. This is where it gets the most creative. Honestly, no real limits at this stage. I actually have a full masterclass on texture paint in Blender and how I use Ucupaint for this, how I build my own brushes, my entire workflow from unwrapping all the way to the baking texture in Blender. If you want to go deeper into how it works, this masterclass available here on YouTube and also on my Patreon, links in the description. Alright, next up, the beams. The material here is simpler than the walls, just 3 layers, and I mainly work with one of them, the mask on the paint layer, to remove paint in specific spots with a brush. A layer more on the anchored brush here gives me more control and a more realistic result. Then I can bring paint back painterly in certain places. Honestly, the whole process comes down to the principle strip away here and back there. Once the overall picture is there and all the textures are done, I can go back and refine details, like adding one more layer to darken the wood transition near the bottom of the walls. Water clearly pulls there, so the wood should read darker in that spots. So here's where things stand at this stage. Compared with the reference, looks good. This is still just a material preview, though once I set up the light in the scene, I'll probably come back to the texture again. For now, let's move to the environment. But before I move on to the environment texture paint, I go back and work on the ground plane using sculpting in Blender, just to add a bit more realism. Ground is never a perfectly flat surface, and even though we could technically fake that with normal map in texture paint, it's better to actually add some unevenness into the surface itself. For the texture paint here, the principle is the same. I need base layer, it's a gravel layer with soil, then a layer with some kind of sand on top of it. Using masks and brushes, I painted where I need each layer based on the reference, which, by the way, if you noticed, stays right in front of me the whole time, right here in Blender. So I don't use second monitor for this, I'd rather have one big screen and keep everything in Blender, even the reference image. Next, the grass layer. This is base layer for the grass at all, and on top of this I'll add actual 3D grass models. The texture layer underneath creates this visual volume. It's a small trick, honestly, because it means I don't have to scatter the grass super densely in the scene, combine it with the texture underneath, and everything blends together visually into one volume. And it actually ends up looking more realistic that way. From there, I refine the details and soften the transition between layers using soft brushes and keep going. I use GeoScatter with manual distribution mode, which is honestly such a great tool. I literally paint exactly where I want grass to appear, using the grass texture mask from the previous step, so I know precisely where the 3D grass need to go. The brushes in GeoScatter also give me a lot of flexibility with the scatter system, letting me locally rise or lower the grass height. Combined with grass texture I already painted, that creates a really realistic transition from base ground into the full grass areas. And I can still go back to the mask anytime to adjust it based on how the grass scatter is turning out. Now that I can see exactly where the grass is, and I can fine tune how soft the transition needs to be towards the main road. Then it backs to working with scatter again. If you want to check out GeoScatter, the link in the description. Next, I need to fill the scene with vegetation, and for that I use BlenderKit. A really convenient tool, models downloaded straight into your scene. Links in the description too. There is a free plan, go ahead and use it. It's not sponsored, just my honest recommendation. Now finding plants that match the game exactly, that's just not realistic. Obviously, all of this was modeled specifically for the game, but we can find the closest matches from BlenderKit and match them scale of every plant to the reference to get as close as possible. The hardest one was the palm trees. Even with BlenderKit having a huge library of palms, once I actually started comparing them closely, almost nothing matched. So I ended up just going with this one. For the sky, I just used a simple sky image with a gradient alpha channel. I actually broke down exactly how that works in my another video, link in the corner somewhere here. For the lighting, I use a combination of sky texture and sunlight. The sky texture works as a global illumination here, and the sunlight acts as, well, the sun. It gives me much more contrasted light than the sky texture alone, but on its own the sky doesn't provide any global light, so combining these two light sources together gives a really solid result. And instead of adjusting the sun's color directly in the light settings, I use black body node on the light source in the shader editor. This way I can deal in the exact color temperature instead of finding with a color wheel, which matches real sunlight a lot more accurately. In the screenshot you can see the shadows are pretty soft, so I increase the radius in the sunlight settings to get the same look. The bigger the radius, the softer the shadows, but don't push this value so far or it starts to look wrong. I also added a touch of volume into the scene just to soften everything up and give it a bit more atmosphere. Not a lot, just a little bit, but it really makes a noticeable difference. Alright, last touch, and I need to add car and motorcycle. Obviously, I couldn't find the exact same car model, but I found something usable on Sketchfab. I leave the links to these models in the description too. So I place them to match the reference, again walking through the camera view. But the problem is these models don't quite match the color of the scene. So I quickly repaint the motorcycle and add some dirt textures just so it doesn't look brand new, more like something that actually gets ridden every day. The car was also just paint white, so I repainted its textures to the color I wanted in Krita. And I add dirt textures there too, because a car can't look spotless, and I also add ambient occlusion to every element, especially the wheels. The wheels I actually ended up swapping out later for something more interesting and better looking. And also I pushed ambient occlusion pretty heavy on them too, so it reads like a car that gets driven every single day, not one sitting in the showroom. Well, at this point everything's basically ready to render, but it's still too early to save the final image. There is a bit more work to do, and I need to balance the whole image out. Right now there are a bunch of objects in the scene whose color and tones just don't sit right yet. And sure, I could spend a ton of times fine-tuning materials and adjusting colors directly on the model, but there is an easy way to handle this. So I switch to the compositing. Before rendering, I already enabled Cryptomatte layer, and this is exactly where it comes in. It looks like this, a bunch of colored blotches, but the point is Cryptomates hold information about literally every single object in the scene. I also saved material information into this Cryptomatte. So what does this actually give me? By selecting Cryptomatte materials, I can instantly turn any material into a mask. All I have to do is click on whatever I want, say this car, and boom, I've got a mask for this exact material. From there, I can do pretty much anything. Say I want to adjust this color, this car color. On the render it looks a bit more bright and I don't love the tone. So using hue correct, I can quickly bring it to the right tone that I actually want. This is way easier than doing the same things in 3D. So in 3D, what really matters to me is getting the color into the right range, and then fine-tuning is precisely so much easier with Cryptomatte in compositing. So using Cryptomatte in Blend, I can pull a mask from any object or material and quickly correct the color or tone for that specific things. Basically do whatever I need, and it's honestly faster than doing the same adjustments back in the 3D scene. Once I've balanced out all the colors and objects in the scene, I move on to the final post-processing post-production stage. For this, I use my own add-on, PowerGrade. It lets me do professional color correction, color grading right inside Blender, no external software needed. Here I'm doing more of global paths on the image, boosting the brightness on the yellow tone in the scenes, since I feel like the sun should read a bit warmer. And I can still always go back to Cryptomatte if I need to make additional local adjustments to specific object, then keep working in PowerGrade, which you can grab on my Patreon, link in the description too. By the way, post-processing got a lot smoother with Blender 5.2 update. It's all finally running on GPU now, so thanks the devs for that. Even heavy EXRs works on the fly, and you generally never have to leave Blender for any kind of work. Also, people ask me a lot in the comments how much time I actually spent on my art pieces. Well, this particular scene took me over a week, since I was really trying to nail every detail from the game screenshot as closely as possible. I spent a good chunk of time just painting all these cracks and paint wear, and spent one whole day just picking out plants. Texture paint obviously was by far the biggest part of this entire project. And honestly, that's why exactly I wanted to make this video in the first place. So, if you want a full detailed masterclass on how to work with texture paint in Blender, how to use Ucupaint, the link to my complete masterclass in the description. Check this out. And here what I ended up with. So it looks good. That's all for today, and I hope to see you in the next one.